in message stream. Have you ever wondered why the most powerful moments in your life happen in silence? When no one is watching, no one is clapping, and no one is validating you. That space where it's just you, your thoughts, and your fight to stay grounded, that's where the real transformation begins. Not in noise, not in drama, but in silence. And in that silence, when you finally decide to focus on yourself, everything changes. You stop running after people who don't see you. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop waiting for the world to give you permission to become who you already are, deep inside. Silence is not weakness. It is power under control. In a world that constantly tells you to speak louder, show more, post everything, and explain yourself to everyone, silence becomes your rebellion. Your quietness becomes your strength. And your self-focus becomes your weapon. See, when you focus on yourself, you step out of the game everyone else is playing, the game of comparison, competition, and craving approval. You start asking deeper questions. What do I really want? What kind of peace do I deserve? Who am I becoming when no one is clapping for me? And these questions hurt at first, because they make you face yourself without filters, without distractions, without the noise of outside validation. But facing yourself is the beginning of real growth. It's the start of self-respect. It's how you reclaim your identity and power. Most people are afraid to be alone with themselves. That's why they chase people. That's why they overshare. That's why they beg for attention. Because silence forces you to confront the truth. And the truth is, some of the people you're fighting to keep in your life, they were never fighting for you. Some of the places you keep returning to were only meant to be lessons, not homes. Some of the things you're constantly trying to explain will never be understood, no matter how many times you say it. So why keep speaking to walls that never echo back? There is something deeply powerful about walking away quietly, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with clarity. When you focus on yourself, you stop chasing closure and start creating peace. You begin building something that can't be broken by rejection, because it was never built for their approval in the first place. You stop being addicted to attention and start falling in love with alignment. You don't need the world to applaud you to know your worth. You don't need to be loud to be heard. Real power is quiet. It doesn't need to convince, it just is. And when you realize that, you begin to move differently. You protect your energy. You guard your time. You stop wasting your words. Not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Because silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of focus. And when you channel that focus toward yourself, you become unstoppable. The truth is, the most dangerous version of you is the one who no longer reacts to everything. The one who doesn't explain, doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't prove. The version of you that simply lets go and levels up. That version is powerful beyond measure. Because nothing confuses people more than a person who just focuses on their own life and refuses to get pulled into chaos. People don't expect it. They expect noise. They expect drama. They expect you to respond. But when you stay silent and keep building, you take back control. You let your growth do the talking. You let your peace become louder than their noise. And that's the reward of staying silent and focusing on yourself. Clarity, strength, freedom. You stop being who the world told you to be and start becoming who you were always meant to be. You stop leaking your energy into people who never deserved it and start pouring it into your dreams. You stop explaining your boundaries and start enforcing them with quiet consistency. And the beauty of it is, those who are meant for you, they won't need noise. They'll feel your energy. They'll respect your silence. They'll recognize your glow even when you say nothing. So keep going. Stay silent. Focus inward. Build in silence. Heal in silence, grow in silence, because what you're creating inside of you is bigger than anything outside of you. And when it finally shows, when the world finally sees what you've been working on in private, they'll realize your silence wasn't emptiness, it was preparation, it was power, and it was peace. The more you focus on yourself, the more you begin to understand how much of your energy was being wasted. Wasted on proving things to people who were never listening. Wasted on fixing relationships that were never broken. They were just mismatched. Wasted on fighting for spaces that kept shrinking your soul. And when you finally pull your energy back, when you stop giving away parts of yourself in exchange for temporary validation, something powerful happens. You begin to rebuild, quietly, steadily, with purpose. This is the moment you stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the architect of your future. Because the truth is, no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you your peace, your growth, your strength. You have to claim it. And you do that by turning inward, not with guilt or shame, but with fierce intention. You stop asking, why don't they see my worth? And start asking, why did I forget it in the first place? That shift in perspective is what breaks the chains. That is the awakening. When you go silent, the noise of the world fades, and your inner voice gets louder. The one that knows you deserve more, or the one that whispers truths you've been too busy to hear. That voice doesn't shout, it doesn't beg, it doesn't panic. It speaks with calm certainty, reminding you that everything you need is already inside of you. You were just too distracted to see it. Focus is not a luxury. It's survival. In a world designed to scatter your attention, reclaiming your focus is the most radical act of self-love. Every time you choose yourself over distractions, you plant a seed of discipline. Every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you plant a seed of wisdom. Every time you invest in your growth instead of explaining your worth, you plant a seed of power. And over time, those seeds grow. They grow into confidence, peace, and self-respect. But don't expect everyone to applaud your silence. Some will be confused. Some will be offended. Some will try to pull you back into the chaos because your peace disturbs their dysfunction. That's how you know you're evolving. Growth intimidates the unhealed. Your silence will speak louder than any argument ever could, because silence forces people to sit with themselves. And that's something many aren't ready to do. Let them be uncomfortable. You are not responsible for making others feel okay with your transformation. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, you're choosing mastery over chaos. You're saying, I no longer live for approval. I live for alignment. And that decision will change the way you move through the world. You'll start attracting peace instead of chasing it. You'll start drawing in people who see your value instead of trying to convince those who don't. You'll stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-giving, not out of arrogance, but because you finally understand your energy is sacred. Your silence teaches you discernment. When you no longer rush to respond, you give yourself the space to observe. You notice patterns, you catch red flags, you sense energy. You start making decisions from a place of power, not desperation. You stop settling for crumbs and start creating feasts within yourself. Because the more you give to you, the less you need from them. And that's what makes you untouchable. People won't always understand your silence, but that's not your burden to carry. Your job is not to be understood. It's to be whole. And wholeness requires solitude. It requires protecting your peace like it's your most precious possession. Because it is. When you have peace within, chaos around you loses its grip. You're no longer easily triggered, manipulated, or thrown off course. You become steady, grounded, and unshakable. That's the version of you the world needs. The one who's not ruled by emotions, but guided by wisdom. The one who's not desperate for attention, but anchored in purpose. The one who doesn't chase, but attracts. And you get there by focusing on yourself relentlessly, by silencing the noise and listening to your inner truth. By saying no more often, not out of fear, but out of power. Don't wait for anyone to give you permission to evolve. Don't wait for applause to validate your journey. Walk silently, heal privately, grow fiercely. Let your results become your voice. Let your actions speak what your words no longer need to. And when they wonder how you did it, you'll smile, not out of pride, but because you know. You did it by going within, by staying silent, by choosing yourself every single time. And nothing, absolutely nothing, is more powerful than that. The moment you start focusing on yourself and stay silent, you reclaim the one thing people constantly try to take from you, your power. Not the kind of power that needs to dominate or control, but the quiet kind, the calm kind, the unshakable kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. This kind of power is earned in solitude. It's built when you're no longer reacting to chaos but observing it. When you're no longer defending your worth but living it. When you're no longer seeking to be seen but becoming undeniable in your presence, even in your absence. Staying silent isn't about shutting the world out, it's about tuning the world out so you can finally hear yourself clearly. Your thoughts, your needs, your standards, your boundaries. All of the parts of you that got buried under the noise of pleasing others, performing for validation, and pretending to be okay. Silence becomes the space where you meet your real self, the version of you that doesn't need to impress anyone to feel valuable. That version isn't chasing love or validation. That version is building strength from the inside out. And yes, it can be lonely at first, because when you choose to focus on yourself, you naturally create distance from those who were only connected to your dysfunction. The people who thrived on your insecurities, the ones who only loved the version of you that needed them. When you grow, you threaten the dynamic. You no longer play small to fit in. You no longer tolerate energy that drains you. You start walking with quiet confidence, not the kind that screams, but the kind that doesn't flinch. That's the level you're stepping into when you go silent. The level where peace becomes your priority, where you measure success not by likes or attention, but by how centered you feel in your soul. Where you stop asking for clarity from people who confuse you. Where you no longer seek love from those who keep showing you they don't know how to give it. You become your own validation, your own closure, your own peace. And what happens next is magical. Your silence begins to attract a different energy. You stop attracting people who want to take from you and start drawing in those who respect your presence, even when you're not speaking. Because silence commands attention in a way noise never can. It makes people pause. It makes them wonder. It makes them realize they never had access to your power. They only had access to your reactions. And once those are gone, they're left with the truth you were the one with the power all along. There's freedom in no longer being easily triggered, in not responding to every insult, every slight, every attempt to pull you back into chaos. You no longer dance to the rhythm of dysfunction. You no longer bleed emotionally just to prove you care. You observe, you detach, you protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And in that space, you evolve. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean you become selfish. It means you become self-aware. It means you understand that you can't pour from an empty cup, that not everyone deserves your story, your presence, your light. Some people only want your energy, not your healing. They don't want you to grow. They want you to stay small so they can feel big. And when you recognize that, you stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You rise, quietly, powerfully. You begin to notice who claps when you win, and who grows distant when you shine. You start to see who respects your boundaries, and who gets angry when you enforce them. And instead of explaining yourself, you simply adjust your access. No drama, no announcement, just distance. Because your silence speaks. It says, I see clearly now. It says, I don't need to argue, I need peace. It says, I'm not angry, I'm just focused. That level of clarity is rare. That level of emotional discipline is powerful. And it only comes when you stop fighting for people's attention and start fighting for your own evolution. When you stop screaming your worth and start living it. When you stop proving your value and start embodying it. You weren't meant to be understood by everyone. You weren't built to beg for love. You were created to rise, to evolve, to align with your highest self. And that version of you is not found in noise. It's found in stillness. So choose you, every single time. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you're finally becoming better for yourself. Focus on your growth, your peace, your purpose. And let your silence remind the world that your value is not up for debate. It's already written in how you carry yourself when no one is watching. Keep going, quietly, relentlessly, powerfully. When you finally commit to focusing on yourself, you begin to break a pattern that's kept you stuck for years, the habit of pouring into others while draining yourself. You start to notice how much of your time, energy, and emotion has been invested in people who never gave it back. And in that moment of truth, something inside you shifts. You stop looking outward for healing and begin the journey inward. Not because you've given up on others, but because you've finally chosen not to give up on yourself. There is a calm power that grows inside you when you realize you no longer need to be everything for everyone. You don't need to be available all the time. You don't need to prove your worth through sacrifice. You don't need to constantly rescue people just to feel needed. You begin to recognize the difference between love and emotional labor, between connection and obligation, and most importantly, you recognize the need to come home to yourself. That home, your inner self, is where everything begins. It's where peace lives. It's where direction comes from. It's where your confidence is born, not from how others treat you, but from how you finally begin to treat yourself. You stop tolerating the bare minimum and start demanding more, not from others, but from within. You begin to align your actions with your standards, your thoughts with your values, and your silence with your purpose. And when you reach that level of alignment, distractions lose their power. The opinions of others become background noise. You're no longer shaken by rejection, ghosting, or judgment. Why? Because you're no longer living for applause. You're living for alignment. You've tasted the kind of peace that comes from being true to yourself, and you're not willing to trade it for temporary attention or approval. Your silence is not weakness. It's sacred space. A space where you reclaim the energy you once wasted on explaining, defending, or chasing. A space where you finally have room to breathe, reflect, and grow. And growth is not loud. It's not chaotic. It's slow. It's steady. It's intentional. It happens in the quiet moments when you choose discipline over distraction, self-respect over people-pleasing, and long-term peace over short-term comfort. This is where transformation begins, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. In the silence where you decide to stop reacting to every slight, every trigger, every invitation to chaos. You learn that not every battle deserves your energy. Not every insult requires your response. Some things are better left unanswered, not because you're weak, but because you've grown beyond the need to prove yourself. You start to protect your energy like it's gold, because you now understand its value. Not everyone should have access to your mind, your time, or your heart. Just because someone wants your attention doesn't mean they deserve your presence. Just because they reach out doesn't mean you need to reach back. That's not coldness, that's clarity. You are not required to carry people who refuse to walk. You are not responsible for healing others while you're still bleeding. You are not obligated to stay in places that no longer inspire your growth. And you certainly don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing yourself. Growth will offend the people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Let it. Focusing on yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. It's how you stop betraying yourself to keep the peace with others. It's how you stop delaying your life for people who are not walking with you, only standing in your way. And when you start choosing yourself without apology, your life begins to change, quietly, powerfully, permanently. People may start to notice the change in you. They may say you've become distant, cold, arrogant. But that's because they can no longer access you the way they used to. You're no longer emotionally available for games, manipulation, or drama. You've become selective, not out of ego, but out of necessity. You now understand that peace is not something you find, it's something you create, and then protect at all costs. And once you get a taste of that peace, that clarity, that emotional independence, you'll never go back. You'll stop begging for closure and start giving it to yourself. You'll stop asking, why me? And start declaring, this is for me. You'll stop needing permission to evolve. You'll realize that you never needed to shout to be heard. Your growth, your silence, your glow, it speaks for itself. So let them wonder why you're quiet. Let them speculate. Let them question your silence. They don't need to understand. They don't need to agree. What matters is that you're finally living in alignment with your truth. You're finally choosing you, Not in pieces, but fully. Not once in a while, but consistently. And that version of you, the one who no longer explains, reacts, or apologizes for growing, is the most powerful version of all. When you no longer allow the world to dictate your worth, you begin to operate from a place of quiet confidence that cannot be shaken. You no longer need to defend who you are, you simply become. And in that becoming, you realize how many versions of yourself you had to shed to finally meet the one that's been buried beneath years of pleasing, proving, and performing. You were never meant to live for their comfort. You were meant to rise, and that rise often begins in silence. You stop negotiating your peace to maintain relationships that don't value your presence. You stop over-explaining your boundaries to people who had no intention of respecting them. You stop searching for comfort in places that only offer chaos. And instead you start rebuilding from within, brick by brick, thought by thought, choice by choice, not out of desperation, but from a place of power that grows stronger every time you say no to what drains you and yes to what aligns with your higher self. Because you've learned that not every connection deserves your loyalty.